Every single living cell, from a tiny little bacterium to the trillions of cells that make you, well, you, is up against the exact same massive challenge: how to stay alive in a world that's always changing. And the secret to their success? Well, it all starts right at the border. Really think about that for a second. A cell has to get food in, get waste out, talk to its neighbors, and keep everything on the inside just right, all while keeping out a bunch of dangerous stuff. That's a huge security and logistics problem, right? So how on earth does it pull it off? Well, the answer is this absolutely amazing structure called the plasma membrane. Now, this isn't some boring static wall. Oh no. It's a super dynamic, intelligent gatekeeper that's constantly checking IDs and controlling everything that comes in and out of the cell. It's basically the hero of our story today. And the entire goal of this amazing gatekeeper is to maintain something called homeostasis. It's just a fancy word for keeping things stable and perfectly balanced on the inside, no matter what kind of chaos is happening on the outside. And the plasma membrane, it's the #1 player making sure that happens. So in this explainer, we're going to break it all down. We'll look at the two main ways the cell manages all this traffic: the easy way, which is called passive transport, and then the hard way, active transport. Then we'll get into why the membrane's flexibility is so crucial. And finally, we'll see why any of this tiny stuff actually matters in the real world. And this chart right here just lays it out perfectly. Passive transport, that's like floating down a lazy river. It doesn't take any energy, you're just naturally going from high to low. Active transport is the complete opposite. It's like trying to paddle canoe upstream, against the current. It takes a ton of energy, in the form of a molecule called ATP, which is the cell's battery pack, to push things from where there's not a lot of them to where they're already crowded. All right, let's start with that lazy river. Let's talk about passive transport. This is all about moving stuff without spending a single drop of the cell's precious energy. It's simple, it's efficient, and it all relies on a really basic rule of physics. And that rule is all about the concentration gradient. Okay, picture this. You drop a little bit of food coloring into a glass of water. It doesn't just stay in one little blob, does it? No way. It spreads out until it's evenly mixed. Molecules are just like that. They naturally want to move from a crowded space to a less crowded space. It's like a ball rolling downhill. It just happens. No effort required. This slide shows two key types of this passive movement beautifully. On the left, you see diffusion. Those red dots, the solutes, are just spreading themselves out. Easy enough. But look at the right side, at osmosis. See that green dotted line in the middle? That's a semi-permeable membrane. It's like a bouncer that won't let the red dots through. So to even things out, the water itself has to move across the membrane to the side where things are more concentrated. Now, diffusion itself comes in a couple of flavors. You've got simple diffusion on the left, which is for the real VIPs, tiny uncharged molecules like oxygen and carbon dioxide. They've got an all-access pass to slip right through the membrane. But for the bigger molecules, like glucose, they need a special doorway. That's what you see on the right, facilitated diffusion. A protein gives them a hand, but it's still passive because they're just flowing downhill, no energy needed. Okay, so that's the easy stuff. But what happens when a cell needs to move something against the flow? When it needs to cram more of something into a space that's already packed? Well, that's going to cost something. That's going to cost energy. Here's the textbook definition, and the phrase you really need to remember is against a concentration gradient. The cell has to physically pump these molecules where they don't naturally want to go. This is the cell literally pushing that ball back up the hill. And the undisputed heavyweight champion of active transport, the one that's working away in pretty much every animal cell in your body right now, is the sodium-potassium pump. This little protein is an absolute powerhouse. And here is its signature move. It is incredibly specific. For every single unit of ATP energy it burns, this pump shoves exactly 3 sodium ions out of the cell and in exchange pulls 2 potassium ions in. It's not random, it's a precision-engineered machine. So let's walk through this little 6-step dance. It all starts on the inside, where 3 sodium ions hop on. That's the trigger. The pump uses 1 ATP for power, which causes it to flip its shape and open to the outside, kicking the sodium out. Now, in this new shape, it's a perfect fit for 2 potassium ions hanging out outside the cell. They bind on, which causes the pump to snap back to its original shape, releasing the potassium on the inside. And boom, the whole cycle is ready to go again. But what if a cell needs to bring in something gigantic, like a whole bacterium? It can't just use a tiny little protein pump for that. Instead, it uses a process called endocytosis.
The plasma membrane itself literally reaches out, wraps around the particle, and pinches off to form a little bubble, called a vesicle, to carry the cargo inside. This is bulk transport, and yeah, it takes a lot of energy.
Now, for any of this to work, for those proteins to move around and for the membrane to pinch off into those bubbles, it can't be a stiff, rigid wall. It has to be fluid. Think of it more like a thick, oily soap bubble. This fluidity is absolutely essential for life. And one of the key molecules that maintains that perfect, just right level of fluidity is cholesterol. It plays this fascinating double agent role. When things get hot, cholesterol gets in between the membrane's molecules to keep them from getting too loose and falling apart. But when it gets cold, that same cholesterol acts like a spacer, preventing the molecules from packing together too tightly and freezing solid. It's a brilliant little temperature buffer. Okay, so we've covered all the tiny microscopic mechanics, but why does any of this actually matter? Well, because the success or failure of these little transport systems has huge, visible consequences in the world all around us. Here's a massive success story for you. Remember that sodium-potassium pump, pushing 3 positive ions out for every 2 it brings in? Well, that creates a tiny electrical charge across the membrane, and your entire nervous system hijacks that charge to send lightning-fast signals. Every single thought you have, every move you make, it's all powered by active transport.
And here's a simple, everyday example of failure. If you stick a plant in really salty water, there's a higher concentration of water inside the plant cells than outside. So because of osmosis, all that water rushes out of the cells to try and balance things. The cells basically deflate, they lose their internal pressure, and the whole plant just wilts.
In humans, the consequences of a single broken transport protein can be devastating. Take cystic fibrosis. A single mutated channel for chloride ions doesn't work right. Because the chloride can't move, water doesn't follow, and mucus in the lungs gets dangerously thick and sticky. And what's wild is that the toxin from cholera bacteria attacks the exact same channel, but it forces it to stay open all the time, causing a massive, life-threatening flood of water out of intestinal cells. But here's the amazing flip side. Because we understand these systems so well, we can actually design medicines that target them on purpose. Certain heart drugs work by slowing down the sodium-potassium pump in heart cells, which actually makes them contract stronger. Diuretics, or water pills, work by blocking channels in your kidneys to help you get rid of excess water and salts. We're essentially hacking the system for our own benefit. So let's end with this thought. This cell membrane isn't just a bag holding stuff in. It's an active, bustling, and incredibly smart border where a constant negotiation for life is taking place. This delicate dance of pushing and pulling, of passive flow and active pumping, that's pretty much the essence of being alive. It really makes you wonder, what other amazing processes inside the cell are all just about finding that perfect, elegant balance?